It's the weekly show about Pro AV with the hottest news in the AV industry. It's rAVe TV. Give it up for Steph and Gary. Steph and Gary.
Good morning, everyone. How's it going, Steph?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. We are split apart. We're not in the same state this morning, but we're making it happen. It is rAVe TV, the industry's only live TV show. We come on live every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern time, which gives us the opportunity to be live in Europe and everywhere else in the world, pretty much, if you're willing to watch us during dinner, maybe, I guess.
Yes.
Sometime. Yeah.
And for the West Coast, you can watch us I'm on the West Coast right now, so it is 6:01 a.m. my time, but we restream this at noon Eastern, so those West Coasters can watch it at 9 their time.
Yeah, and tell them why you're on the West Coast. You're at an event, right?
I am at an event. I am at PSA and Edge's Spring Partner event. So this is a kind of 2.5-day event, and I am here covering it. There are a bunch of sessions, and there's security integrators here and AV integrators here, and we're kind of just all talking a little bit about what's going on in the industry, and it's been really great so far.
Yeah, and they're a great company. If you haven't paid attention to what they're doing, they're growing. A lot of stuff going on, and it's a good sign for our industry. Tell me what the talk is. I know you spent a day and a half there now. What's the talk as far as the integrators' feelings about the industry and the direction the year is going?
I think mostly positive. We talked, there was a really good panel led by Dan Farisi yesterday, and it was kind of about where they're seeing the convergence, and they are starting to see it, but they talked about the struggle is if you go into AV, you can just kind of do AV. Like, there are certifications, but a lot of them aren't required to do AV. But with
whereas security, that you have to get licensed, is that what you mean?
Yes, there are some. Okay. It depends on your state, and luckily the guy who was talking was from North Carolina, so that's our state.
Oh, interesting.
And he was talking about how you have to be alarm certified to do any type of security anything, and that now there are even some stipulations county per county, and in North Carolina we have 100 counties, so you just have to be so knowledgeable about what's going on everywhere you are to do security, and there's that kind of barrier to entry for AV integrators.
It makes sense. Yeah, but I think I wouldn't even call it convergence. I would call it an opportunity for AV integrators to get into having a deeper relationship with their client, because the nice thing about security is they're doing what we're trying to do in AV, which is to have recurring revenue for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, obviously the recurring revenue model and cloud-based opportunities are a thing that AV is playing around with. That was even a huge thing that I saw talked about at NAB. Like, everyone was putting everything in the cloud. I think that we're going to see a ton of that for the next couple of years. But security is an industry that's doing like a recurring revenue model very well. So AV can definitely learn from them.
I agree. Well, hopefully they'll listen to what you're saying, because I think there's a great opportunity there. And I'm here, interested to hear more. So I just want to remind you about for those of you who are interested, if you're we obviously have all different kind of listeners here, but one of our most loyal listener base is manufacturers in the industry. If you have not entered our Best of Infocom Awards for 2026, there's only let's see, what's the deadline? I can't remember the deadline.
Early bird is by this Friday, so if you want to pay that cheaper price, definitely apply by this Friday, and then it's going to be a little more expensive, but the application will stay open until May 22nd, and that gives me and the judges some time to go through and rank and pick our winners. So we did change it up this year, but so far it's gone really well. We've got some applications in, which is exciting. And if you have questions about the application, I've gotten a few emails about, hey, Steph, how would you say, what would you clarify to be a micro LED? So if you have any questions about any of the categories like that, you can email me at steph@ravepubs.com, and I'll be happy to talk to you and clarify any of the categories for you.
Well, take that opportunity to do that. And of course, the deadline now apparently is my birthday.
Yeah, it's your birthday
good
present.
to know. Good to know. It's my birthday present. There you go. And then we have a video. We want to show you a video on the Crestron One Beyond I-12D camera. So check this video out real quick. And then we have a special guest.
Let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Welcome, first timer at rAVe TV, Matthew Malone. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So first things first, if you would just tell those people who are watching and listening a little bit about who you are and what you do for Crestron.
So I've been in the AV industry since college. My last 14 years have been with Crestron, which has been a great role and a great company to work for. I've done everything in this company from managing our enterprise clients, our largest corporate customers in the Northeast, to now managing our higher education. So I predominantly handle the Northeast territory and call on all the higher education schools in the area to support them.
Very cool. You and Gary have that in common. Gary also works in higher ed, so I'm interested to hear both of your perspectives on some of this. So, Matthew, starting off at a high level, what are you seeing in higher ed right now? Are you seeing a lot of demand? Are you seeing constraints, or are you seeing kind of a little bit of both, a little bit of push and pull there?
Definitely a little bit of both. All depends on the school as far as budgets and constraints go. But overall, we're definitely seeing more demand. Budgets now are finally stabilizing. That was kind of the topic for the last 12 months is the instability in the budgets. A lot of the COVID rooms, that go back to 2020 are now coming up for updates. We're seeing more video-enabled rooms, as Teams and Zoom becomes more popular in classrooms, where schools want to bring in remote speakers to talk to the class, but also have remote learning. We're also seeing more AV over IP in schools, which we're happy about, giving schools more flexibility on how they deploy the rooms. We're also seeing more two-way collaboration where, students are kind of going off into, pods in the room and then collaborating back to the class. The other thing we're seeing a lot more too is also faculty spaces. So not only are we managing the classroom spaces, but also those faculty spaces, those Zoom and Teams rooms that are more for the faculty to use that aren't part of the classroom.
Gary,
how about yeah. I'm sorry, Steph, what were you asking?
Oh, I was just gonna ask if you were seeing the same thing since you're at UNC every day.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much, we've become a video everywhere campus. Audio is not as important to us as video, meaning it's kind of by default. We expect audio to be there and we're not focusing on it. We're focusing on amping up the video. Audio has already been in our classrooms for a long, long time. But yeah, I agree with him as far as I would say I would catalog as other spaces, because it's not just like conference room spaces, but ad hoc spaces, but also creating spaces out of digital signage monitors that are hanging in different locations, study carrel areas. I mean, all of it is, the thing about higher education always starts first. So it's a great place to test out new products and technology because we adopt first before any other segment of the market. But obviously budgets are always an issue. How are you seeing the budget cuts? Because especially with public education, Matt, I mean, there's not a single public university that's not having to do budget cuts right now.
Yeah, budget definitely, like I say, is the topic of 2025, 2026. We are seeing budget cuts in a lot of schools, and the question is, how do we get the most out of our budget? Can we take old equipment that's been in the room and add new features and new equipment on top of that old equipment? So, a lot of schools, it's very important to them that whatever standard they pick, can be used with the product that's existing in the room, and and kind of a long lifespan, based on the company's history of supporting legacy product. We see, will new gear work with old gear is a pretty common thing as far as budget cuts. Making the room more flexible, is kind of that budget conversation. Then also, as part of the budget conversation, we're seeing a lot more wireless being used in classrooms, because with wireless, I may not have to worry about how I get the wires, to certain locations or spaces in the room. So that can really dramatically lower that cost of that room if I can use a wireless solution instead of having everything hardwired.
Makes a lot of sense. Since you're seeing and we're seeing so many more AV enabled spaces on college and university campuses, in your opinion, do schools actually have the staff to support all of that tech?
I laugh because, I don't know if there's a single school that's saying we have too many AV staff in our spaces. We have the luxury of a giant AV staff. The reality is interesting. Most schools, since COVID, I would say, conservatively, the amount of AV-enabled rooms or video-enabled rooms has probably multiplied by a factor of 5 or 10, probably conservatively. And I can tell you, I don't know of a single school whose AV staff has grown at the same rate as the workload. So, that's actually, one of the challenges is how do we manage, twice as many or 10 times as many rooms with the same AV staff that we had, pre-COVID. So what we're seeing is, number one, can we simplify the space, make it easier to manage? But also, can we use a remote management tool? Can we use some cloud-based services that allow fewer people to be in more spaces at the same time? So a lot of schools that we're seeing are implementing our cloud solution, our XIO cloud, for 3 reasons. Number one, the XIO cloud will give them advance notice if a room goes down. So that way they can deal with it on Friday night, not Monday morning. Also, they can reboot a room remotely, so they don't have to, run across the campus, to reboot that room. They can do it remotely. But also they can log into that room remotely and actually, control the room remotely without actually having to be there. So that's definitely probably the fastest growing segment for us in the education space is that remote management capability.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. There's no question there's been a cutback. However, at the same time, the gear has gotten a lot simpler, and it used to be there was a rack of equipment in all the rooms, and that rack of equipment is gone. In fact, if the audio industry would get their stuff straightened up, that rack of equipment would be gone, because there's a lot of audio stuff that's still required to be in the room that is creating complexity of rooms. And there are ways to remote that, right? I mean, it's amazing to me how much Dante has been adopted, and also at the same time how much it hasn't been adopted with regard to traditional audio applications, Matt. And that's that remote management can only go so far, right? I mean, it stops when the cable goes analog, right? It stops when you're using legacy installed gear, and we can't do wireless audio reliably the way we could do wireless video, which is kind of ironic considering the bandwidth issues there. And that's basically because the companies like Crestron, for example, y'all have focused on AV over IP, but the audio, you stop at the input audio, not the output audio, right? The output audio, making that wireless and completely making it's that way with every company, right? I mean, like, we don't really truly have wireless speakers like we do wireless everything else in the industry yet, Matt. And I think that creates some complexity, and we're always kind of nervous about that, right? But we have that gear already installed. And I do think that we're going to see continued erosion of human support and more automated support, more AI-based support, like you said, predicting problems before they happen, and things like that. So I agree with you on that.
It's funny you mentioned the AV rack going away, and it's always whenever I go to a school that's migrated to AV over IP, that's always a point of pride. They always take me to where the rack was.
Yeah.
This whole rack now is just these 2 boxes.
Yeah.
So I had to smile when you said that, because boy, is that a point of pride for a lot of schools when they go AV over IP. As far as audio goes, I think it's twofold. I think audio doesn't progress at the rate that video does. So when you talk about budgets, a lot of schools are trying to reuse that old audio gear because to upgrade the speakers and the amplifiers, the cadence of that upgrade really isn't in sync with video and other technologies in terms of the need to upgrade. We do have Crestron is progressing in that direction though. So we do have AV over IP speakers where you can literally just run a network cable up the ceiling, and the amplification in the DSP is actually built into the speaker. And we do see that expanding, just as the rack goes further and further away.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, I honestly think for the kind of audio we're doing, now you're doing a movie theater, it's different. You're doing you're doing a live event, different. But in the kind of stuff we're doing where we have limited frequencies, we're just trying to solve a problem and make a room do, we know exactly what we need the room to do. Going completely wireless is huge. I think that's going to be a great opportunity for industry. And I agree with you on that. But in any case, we've also gone AV over IP, as you may know, but we're also seeing spaces kind of forced to be more flexible, where you have a classroom that used to have a head of room and it doesn't have a head of room now. And so we're having to be creative in the way that we're putting displays, but also the signal routing and distribution for that becomes different in that particular case. Are you running into that?
Yeah, so we're seeing more of what I call like the active learning classrooms out there on campus. Now, there's always going to be the campus where they'll never get rid of their chalkboards, they'll never get rid of their lecture halls, because that's a part of the theater of that classroom. But we are seeing more of these collaborative spaces in education where there isn't necessarily a front of the room, but there's also pods throughout the spaces where the students can collaborate and learn. And I think that's also like a generational thing as far as how students like to work together in groups and learn as groups. And that creates some unique challenges. And it's really, those are really fun projects for us, because it kind of leads to what we want to do at Crestron in terms of collaboration. And in those spaces, what we're seeing is we're seeing more AV over IP, where all of those monitors at those pods, are just endpoints, and we can sync them all together and share the same content, or they can become breakout sessions. So the flexibility of AV over IP in that situation is great. And what we're also seeing in those situations is we're seeing two-way communication, where not only is the teacher sending information to the pods, but the pods are sending that information back to other pods and to the front of the room. And they're either doing that through AV over IP or they're doing that wirelessly.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that's an interesting design decision, because it also depends on who's teaching in those rooms. We have found that the younger the teacher, age-wise, the more likely they are to use the collaborative, active learning classroom features. And I think it comes down to comfort with new technology, but also teaching style. Because if you're used to teaching all linear, then you don't necessarily use it that way. But if you're more flexible, then I think that plays really well. So I think it depends on who's using that room. So doing that wholeheartedly campus wide doesn't tend to work out really well. You have to kind of address it, almost professor by professor in our case.
And the room needs to be able to do both. The room needs to be able to satisfy that professor that just wants to come in, plug his MacBook in and present, but it also has to have that ability to be more granular, when you have that different professor that gets to technology and likes to throw things on different screens. So, and I think that comes down to the flexibility of the system, as it's designed, and also the interface that the professor is using. It has to be simple.
Yeah.
It's our job to hide the technology behind a simple interface.
Agreed.
Well, last question I have for you, Matt, is where can people reach out to you and where can they find more about Crestron?
So a couple things. If you're attending InfoComm, Crestron is a big, maybe the biggest presence in InfoComm. So we welcome you to come by there to see the technology, put your hands on it, see it working. You can reach out to crestron@crestron.com. Or if you want to hear from your local A+, my counterpart in your area, you can send me an email directly. My email address is my first name, my last name, so matthew.malone@crestron.com. And if you're in my area, I'm happy to help you out. But if not, I can connect you with your local Crestron A+ rep.
Awesome.
Well, it's been great. Thanks. I appreciate you joining. It's good to have you on. It's always good to have a new face on rAVe TV because to learn from different perspectives out there, and the fact that he's focused on higher education is really kind of cool.
Absolutely. I thought he would be an interesting person for you to talk to in particular. You'll have a lot in common.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one exhibitor I'm excited about for Infocom is ViewSonic. I think you're going to see a whole new company at Infocom 2026. So check this out this video on their all-in-one LEDs.
Awesome. And next, I would just like to introduce an interview that I did with ViewSonic's Ruval. We kind of talked about holistic meeting spaces and where the IFP can fit into that meeting space. So check this out. Hey everyone, joining me for this next segment of rAVe TV is Ruval, who's a product manager at ViewSonic. Haley, first of all, welcome to rAVe TV. It's your first time joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
Of course, first of all, tell everyone who is watching and listening a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Haley. I'm a product manager at ViewSonic. I've been here for almost 4 years. I've been working on our interactive flat panels as well as our software to support those panels, and doing a little bit with our accessories as well. So really getting a lot of experience throughout the company.
That's awesome. So when people think of ViewSonic, they obviously think of displays, but what we're kind of talking about today is a holistic meeting room space and meeting room experience. What does that actually mean to you beyond just putting a bigger and better screen in the room?
Yeah, when you're looking at a meeting room, it's really about how the people are going to use it. So it's the collaboration, the annotation that they would be doing on a screen, or the networking or connectivity. So it goes way beyond just a bigger and better screen. Of course, that plays a role in it with making sure that all of the pieces are working together. But really, when it comes to the holistic approach, we want to make sure that everything just works. So having a display that connects with your existing peripherals or any of your other types of items that you're using in your environment is going to make sure that the meeting room stays productive just as you intended.
Awesome. And when you look at an interactive flat panel or IFP today, what role is it really playing in each meeting room? Is it still just a display? Is it becoming kind of that central part of the meeting room experience? Where do you see it fitting in?
Yeah, it's definitely becoming more of the central part of collaboration in a space. So rather than just viewing a static image on a screen, now you're actually able to interact with that piece of content. You can leave notes, you can collaborate in real time with your employees or your coworkers. But something that's really interesting is that on a day-to-day basis, we use touchscreens often from our phones and tablets. And then also as the younger members of the workforce start to join, they're coming from schools that typically had these touch or interactive panels. So they're entering the workforce very used to and accustomed to using those types of panels to write down notes and really work with their classmates. So we can see that it's really headed in that direction in the meeting room and beyond.
That makes a lot of sense. But when we look at like the wide range of what meeting rooms look like today, a lot of them are still very fragmented because there's a bunch of different devices that all have different interfaces that sometimes don't always play together the best. How does an IFP kind of end up simplifying a lot of these processes?
Yeah, sometimes it can be really overwhelming when there's lots of different components to a meeting room, and that's usually where a lot of things break down. But when we're working with our interactive lab panels in a room, it starts to act as that connection hub. So that's where all of your existing peripherals can reach into to be able to access things so that you can still have your meeting, or you can use it to write on the board. So if you have working with our existing partners, so you can run a meeting directly through the panel. And what's great too is there's so many different options when it comes to setting up the interactive panel. So it can be based on how your users need to use it. So that could look like using either the embedded operating system directly on the panel or plugging into a slot-in PC. There's lots of different options, but of course it can also plug in with your existing meeting room components as well.
From your perspective, where are you seeing meeting rooms still break down for users? Because we kind of talked about when meeting rooms do have a ton of different products with all different interfaces that all need to be used a different way. They all need to plug in. So naturally, there's going to be things that fail every now and then. Where are you seeing things break down, even when technology is like working, allegedly?
Yeah, so if the technology is all connected and working in a room, it can still be overwhelming for the users who are going into that meeting room. It can be a lot of choices that they have to make sure, how do I get this up and running? How do I start a meeting? And then once they're in that meeting, how do they continue it or switch to a different presenter? So with that, there are so many different systems right now. And so it's really that transition period where most of it starts to break down. So once you have the piece of equipment that you're using to start working, it's going to be more difficult to actually get it to start or do something different. So the displays really come in play because it's going to work with your existing software or existing hardware that you're already using in a space that many people are already accustomed to. So there's less training, and it's really focusing more on that plug and play approach. So just making sure that everything just works in a space and it's built for the users who need it the most.
And for end users or those IT teams that are kind of rethinking meeting spaces right now, what do you think they should prioritize first? Do you think it should be display or software or overall workflow or something else?
So all of those are really important components when you're deciding how you're going to revamp your meeting room. I would say also making sure that you're talking to the users that are going to be using the meeting space and understanding what exactly they need to accomplish in that space. Do they need to work with multiple people? Are they going to have hybrid meetings where some people are calling in while some people are in person in the room? So there's a lot of discussion around workflow and making sure that everything is plugged in and working properly, but also there's that training component. So we do have different displays that are going to be able to support it. The display really should not be the main number one focus. It should be another component. So understanding that the connectivity, the use cases for your users is working as intended, and making sure that the software is all set up, ready to go, and the rest of the hardware, so your cameras, your audio, all of that room control and also device management are all going to come into play. But it's really thinking about how can we make these displays flexible for your solution. So we're really leading with a solution-based approach, and I think that's the best way to start when it comes to revamping a meeting room.
Awesome. And last question for you, for anyone who has any questions about ViewSonic's meeting room display lineup or accessory lineup or anything ViewSonic, where should they go?
Yeah, I would definitely highly recommend going to viewsonic.com to learn more. We have different verticals based on your needs. There are also some solution pages so you can learn specifically how to set up a meeting room for how your company needs it to be working effectively.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Haley. Thanks for being on rAVe TV.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Interview, Steph, way to go. I'm looking forward to seeing what they're doing. I think they're kind of underestimated as a brand. One of the things that's starting to come up a lot that we wrote an article on, Peyton wrote an article on this week that I think is going to be a bigger and bigger deal in our industry over the next 10 years, less so now, is the whole tech industry has a big e-waste problem.
Absolutely.
With the exception of Apple. Apple has addressed it, and they've gone. Some of their products are completely 100% recyclable. They handle it for you, and by 2030, 100% of their products not only will be 100% recyclable, but also they're going to run all the Apple stores and offices completely off the grid from a power standpoint. But most companies don't have that kind of money. They're not trillion-dollar companies. And so therefore, it's going to become a bigger and bigger problem. And sort of like all this has been dumped on the integrators as a responsibility.
Yeah.
And so what happens is they go and do an install stuff, and now they've got to collect all the old stuff. And they have to deal with it, right? I mean, that's part of the deal. And so Peyton did a great job kind of talking about some of the numbers that are out there and what sAVe is doing, the nonprofit dealing with this in our industry, and their goals for 2030. So if you want to read that piece, check it out. I definitely think it's worth checking out, and it'll help you understand what your responsibilities are.
Absolutely. And real quick, we're going to do a quick commercial from our final sponsor and partner, Shure, on the importance of AV security in the digital age. And Gary and I will be right back.
In today's technology-driven world, audio conferencing equipment is central to seamless communication, effective presentations, and remote learning or working. But when it comes to securing these AV devices, many institutions fall short, treating them differently from their laptops and other IT equipment. This oversight can put your entire network at risk. It's time to bridge this gap and approach AV device security with the same rigor. Securing AV equipment is more than just a safeguard. It's a strategic move that enhances your organization's reputation, protects sensitive data, and ensures operational continuity. Here are 3 reasons why AV device security is essential. Data protection, network integrity, operational continuity. Implementing robust AV security involves 4 key steps. 1. Network segmentation to isolate AV devices to minimize risk. 2. Stay protected with updated firmware. 3. Strong authentication and encryption. Set and use complex passwords and encrypt data. 4. Establish and educate on AV security policies through training. In an era of sophisticated cyber threats, a proactive approach to AV device security is not just smart, it's essential. Secure your AV equipment, protect sensitive information, and ensure your organization is ready for the future.
Sorry about that, Steph. I missed that piece.
It's all right. No big deal. Let's continue on. Let's talk about David Danto's latest piece that he wrote for rAVe, which is about NAB. And he talks about how NAB finally makes sense because it doesn't make sense. And he's kind of talking about the thing that I mentioned last week about how the end user for NAB is such this crazy, wild, range of people, right? So you have AV integrators, you have people in broadcast, you have higher ups from different news stations and TV stations, and then you have content creators and YouTubers and Twitch streamers. So the end user is so vastly ranged that it's hard for the manufacturers to be like, okay, what do we bring to make the most sense? So they kind of just bring everything. And David talks about how that used to kind of be a criticism and a real problem, but now it's kind of its strength, because all of us are kind of shifting toward using content creation tech in different methods. So he's saying it makes a lot of sense now. So on one side of the trade show area, you could be looking at Ross Video. So you're looking at like a very detailed production switcher that like no one would ever be able to know how to use unless you like do that every day. And then you walk to like aisles over, and then you see a Blackmagic setup built for your smartphone. So it's definitely a very different show, but those things, he says, belong together because the industry is constantly changing. So the modern media world now means it encompasses things like smartphone rigs, but also giant production switchers. So I thought it was an interesting take.
So we have an article on our website about NSCA releasing the 2026 economic output. They do a really good job every year, kind of wrapping things up and making you feel scared or better about the industry, depending on what side of the industry you're on and where we're doing economically. Right now, we're doing really, really well, as you know, so there's a lot of opportunity out there. So check out the economic report. If you're a member of NSCA, if you're not a member of NSCA, you can go to nsca.org and join.
Absolutely. And not a ton of products from the last week, but Absen has the new Saturn series solution. So it's the SA 1.5, basically their latest addition to the Saturn series. This is its 1.56 millimeter pixel pitch, full flip chip, chip on board technology, monolithic panel structure, so very, very stable. And basically this technology that they put into this is meant to extend its lifespan. So the power consumption is also 30% lower than previous models, and the stability is 40% greater than in other conventional products. And it's also backward compatible with all of their Saturn accessory ecosystem. And it's got anti-reflection on it, dual layer cabinet. So if you want to see the full list of specs and where you might be able to use this, definitely go to ravepubs.com.
We have 2 virtual events coming up before the end of the month. What's that?
One's today.
Yeah, one is at 2 p.m. today from Devices to Systems Rethinking the Modern Meeting Room. And this is in partnership with Shure. So you should register for that. Even if you can't attend, that gives you access to the recording. But if you can attend, awesome. I think you'll really get a lot out of it because it'll be live. And then we have one tomorrow at 2 p.m. as well, which is it's all about video now, why AV and broadcast are finally the same conversation. And that's sort of like your takeaways from NAB. So that one's at 2 p.m. Again, sign up for these, even if you're not sure you're able to join, because it gives you access to the recordings. Plus, you'll get notified when the recordings are posted and stuff like that. So good reason to sign up. But so Steph, it was great doing this. I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Will you be back in North Carolina?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I guess you'll be back until InfoCon, right?
Yeah.
Next,
so.
Okay, yeah. So we'll be, and don't forget at InfoCon, we do live rAVe TV every single day.
Yep. So I look forward to doing that with you, Gary.
Yeah, same. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
It's the weekly show about Pro AV with the hottest news in the AV industry. It's rAVe TV. Give it up for Steph and Gary. Steph and Gary.